Alrighty, so this is going to be should be the last video. This is really going to be about quick lighting and rendering. We're not going to go into every possible thing we could do with lighting and rendering on this project. We'll see more as we go along to later projects. But we kind of wanted to explore some of the basics for it. So one of the things I do is I quickly want to create kind of a floor for this character. So I'm going to go back to modeling really quick, and before for object mode, we can go to add, mesh, and what we can do is we just add a plane, right? I'll hit R for scale, of course, and middle mouse button will allow us to kind of drag it up to make it bigger. All right, there we go. And then, of course, W for move, and we can just kind of grab that blue arrow, move it down, roughly so the kind of crab feet stick through it a bit. You know, some crab feet can be up because we've got a pose for it. That's fine. But we just wanted a floor for our actual crab to be sitting on, right? So now I'm going to go back to shading, and we're going to zoom out a little bit. Now, one of the cool things is you can actually already see that we get this kind of cool preview in the viewport here. And remember, that's actually because of the Eevee viewport shading, right? That's just regular shaded. That's Eevee viewport shading. And you can see I've already kind of done a little bit of stuff to the lighting because we kind of played with that a little bit in the previous project, right? So we've already got a default light in the scene. And for this project, that's going to be fine. So what you do is you can click on the light. Right, so it's part of our scene collection here in our outliner. Click on the light, and you'll notice that when you click on the light, one of the options is kind of down here, kind of right above kind of the texture load-in thing is kind of what looks like a green light bulb, and that's light. Now, by default, it's actually a point light in Blender, but you notice how you kind of get this very flat lighting with the point light. So for us, what we're going to do is we're going to switch it to sunlight. Right, that's going to be a directional light for us, right, like that one. Now, the cool thing is that when this directional light's on, there's a couple things you can do with it. One, by default, it's actually usually quite intense. It's like at 1,000, so you see how it's really, really bright. So your strength is right here. We can set that to something much lower, like, say, 30, right? You can control the angle of the shadow, which will soften the shadow, right? So if we set that to, say, like 0, the shadow becomes sharper and harder. If we turn it up, like, say, 5 degrees, it starts to soften it a little bit, right? And that's interactive, so you can adjust it until it gets softer and softer. So if you make it too soft, it starts to fade away too much. So shadows, you want to have some level of kind of softness. So there's no right answer for these, right? It kind of depends on the size, how it's looking in a scene. But, you know, probably something like this would be good. You can, of course, have it cast shadows or not cast shadows, right? And there's further options in here, but usually the default's fine. So one of the things you'll notice about Blender is that its actual real-time preview viewport's actually quite awesome and does a good job of matching the actual final renders themselves. In fact, if you want a better idea of exactly what the full render is going to look like, what you can do is there is this last button, which actually does a full interactive render, right? The full quality. You see kind of how the shadows become like more pronounced. By default, though, when I click on this, you'll see, of course, scene lights and scene world are on. You can kind of turn scene world off if you want to see kind of this background there for it. But if you go to our renderer here, right? Remember, we've seen that before. There's like the wrench and the screwdriver, and then there's that little render tab below there. Right now, it's using Eevee, even for this one, right? So if we switch to cycles, you're going to see that this is going to do the full actual render. And you'll see that Eevee and this full render actually match pretty closely, but not identically, right? You are getting a full ray traced global illumination render when you switch to cycles, right? We'll talk about that more as we get into later projects, but you'll notice that we actually start to get this kind of nice, cool render, and we can rotate around it interactively. If you want, you could, like we said, play with this light some more. This little yellow dot you can use to move the light. But of course, you know, E for rotate will work. W for move, right? So this is an object that you can select, and you can move it around to kind of adjust it for yourself. And you see what this does is this actually gives us a nice little preview render. So kind of that last one really gives you that option, right? And gives you kind of all that nice little bounce light and something shadows. You can see the normal maps there. And of course, you can always adjust the strength of those if you want to. At this point, what we want to do, and we'll kind of explore denoising a little bit later on. 2.9, there's actually denoising here now, and you can have it actually render. And if you want, you can actually use the open image denoise. It will take a little bit of time, though. and then you can tell it to be on a viewport, right? What that is, that's actually using kind of an independent of your real-time card denoising. If you guys don't denoise this, right, and it kind of looks a little bit noisy, I'm not going to mark an EB down for that for the rendering. But this is something they've been working on the last couple versions, and 2.9 has a really cool version of it. So if you get a bit of noise in here and you want to kind of reduce that, just go to Render, turn it on and Render and Viewport, and Open Image will probably work well. And you can set it to kind of that as well. And then you'll see, as we adjust it, and it does slow down the rendering performance a little bit, so it's kind of the thing that you kind of want to do more when you're happy, because it's how it kind of does have to post-process it. But it does get rid of that noise. And then at this point, what we want to do is we want to make sure we're properly looking through the camera. In this case, we can go to View here, and we can actually have it set Active Object as Camera, which in this case, we'll kind of select the camera, go to View, Cameras, set Active Object as Camera, or Active Camera, right? And now you can see that there's the actual camera itself. One of the things that you'll notice is that it's kind of right here, and so you might want to just kind of move it back a bit, right, to get us more of a full shot. And then we can go to View, Cameras, Active Camera. And so it's getting us a little bit closer. And one of the things you could do is you could actually, since it's selected, you can turn Rotate on, and you can kind of play with that a little bit, right? Oh, my bad. But you see, you kind of might want to adjust the camera settings a little bit, and just kind of get the right shot and the right angle you want for this. So I often find that I'm kind of going around in here and just kind of selecting the camera and just kind of adjusting it a little bit. So I'll kind of bring it back out here a little further. Then we'll go back to View, Cameras, Active Camera. If you hit W, you should be able to move it around a little bit, right? So W, and you can just hit the middle mouse button to move it around. And what that'll do is that'll give us kind of our shot, kind of seeing it through the camera. To adjust the resolution, you can go right here, right? So right below this guy is our resolution controls. And you see it's by default set to 920 1080, so that should be fine. And then what we do is we go to Render, Render Image. And it's going to bring up the full render compositor, doing it through that camera view. There we go. And then, of course, when this is done, you can save this image, and that's how rendering works. And you see as it goes through, it's kind of doing the full render, it's doing the denoising, right? Kind of let it finish up its job here. And that's how lighting and rendering works, right? Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. It's kind of one of those things. Once again, this is a short video, much like our pose was. It's just a little bit of finishing touches, just so we can have kind of a pretty final image and not just our model. So kind of wanted to make sure to get that in there for you guys, to make sure that you know how to render. And we're going to explore this more in depth later on as we go and do other things. But I figured a simple kind of pass on the basics of rendering would be kind of cool, just to see how it works and see that Blender's got a pretty cool render, right? And then when it's done, which it should be here in a few minutes, it cleans everything up, you can go here and you can save, right? And that's how that works, right? So you just go to Image, Save, and yeah. And of course, you could save as. You could tell it where you want, save as here. So